From the Channel Seed Studios, Nick Osen and Jake Brend talk all things Big 12. This is Firmly Entrenched, powered by Heartland Flags and Gifts. Every team, every sport, every flag, almost. Here's Nick and Jake on Iowa Everywhere.
Welcome into the Channel Seed Studios for a sweet Firmly Entrenched, powered by Heartland Flags and Gifts right here in the Channel Seed Studios. We are recording this on a Monday evening. It's going to get released Tuesday. I can't imagine there's going to be many things that can date this episode. Osen, where were the Badgers?
I was out east. I was in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry about that. We'll just leave it at that. Tough trip for you.
Tough trip, quicker than expected, but grateful I got to do it. You know, there's always a new season, and we're here to talk about another team that obviously is on a little bit of a roll. A couple teams, actually.
So I forgot to mention this in our group chat, but I talked to Brett Yormark in Omaha. So I was with my good friend Nico Frazier. He used to be a photographer over in the Quad Cities. He moved to Omaha. This guy said he's worked like 18 days in a row. So we were just chatting, and this was on Saturday night. This was on Saturday night, probably an hour before the game. And we're in this huge convention center, which is where the media workroom is. And Yormark, like, he's kind of walking past me, makes eye contact with me. I've got like a suit on, suit and tie. He does too. Then he walks over to me, shakes my hand. I'm like, how's it going, Commissioner Yormark? And he's like, where's the bathroom at? I'm like, yep, it's right back there. Good to see you.
And didn't you run into him at the bathroom at the Big 12 too?
Yeah, it was at the urinal right next to him. Those are like my two run-ins with the Yormark. So, yeah, I'm kind of a big deal.
Man, that's awesome. He knew you'd know, though. He knew who to ask.
I must have looked important in the suit and tie, but Nico and I were just dying as he walked away. I'm like, yeah, I do kind of have some pull in this industry. But I was not even planning on starting there, but I don't know why I thought of that right before the show started. All right, we got so much to talk about in the hoops world. We had a thriller out in Cali last on Sunday. The Iowa State men advanced to the Sweet 16. We're going to preview that Sweet 16 in Boston and then even a little bit of recruiting talk. Let's start out in Palo Alto. Gosh, that's a mouthful of a town. The Cyclone women lose a thriller in overtime, 87-81. Just an all-time game. 13 ties, 18 lead changes. If you would have told me that it was 26 ties and 36 lead changes, I would believe you. It felt like that. That's my number one take. It's obviously a missed opportunity and all that, but my number one takeaway is just that was an incredible display of basketball.
Well, I had just finished, so I get back to town. I'm watching Houston, Texas A&M game, right? I don't know if you got to see a ton of that, but basically It's like, okay, that was about as good of a game as you will see. And then that ends, and I get to catch, like, you know, kind of much of how the Iowa State women's game ended, and that was an even better quality game. Like, I think we will get into the missed opportunities portion a little bit, because at times I really thought they were going to come out with that win. But an incredible game, back and forth, really felt like more of an Elite Eight, Final Four type matchup. Like, punch after punch, teams are answering, and also maybe some unexpected big time shot makers in this one. Like, obviously there's a star on each team at least, but they weren't even the best players in this one.
Yeah, you mentioned the missed opportunities. Iowa State was a couple rolls, a couple bounces away from beating a 2 seed at the NCAA women's all-time wins leader on their home floor, and their leading scorer was 3 of 21 from the field. 48 hours after she was 18 of 20. So if you would have told me before the game, Audie Crooks went 3 of 21, like, ooh, they lose by 35.
Sheesh.
But seriously, like, you think back to the Texas game and the Big 12 championship, Audie was awesome in that game, and they still just got run off the floor. So I think that's a compliment in itself to just what a performance it was, really, by everyone. But let's go, Emily Ryan, top billing, 36 points, had the game of her life. It's a shame that the best game of her career won't be remembered in a win, but no matter what happens, that is an iconic Iowa State performance that will be remembered for a long, long time. Like up there in the Dustin Hogue realm. I believe he also had 36 when Iowa State lost to UConn in this 2014 Sweet 16. It was one of those where it's just they found a zone that I don't know if they'd ever been in before, and it was so fun to watch.
Yeah, she was honestly incredible. Like, couldn't miss in those big time spots. And while you said, it's a shame that it comes in a loss, I think the really nice thing is that she is going to be again one of those leaders next year.
Yeah.
For a team that, as we get a little bit further here, can return just about every key contributor. And while I think this stuff is, cliche about like momentum carrying to the next season, that type of thing, I think this is a group that actually could apply, because as we know, they very much overexceeded their expectations. Really a fun team. We figured they'd be entertaining, but they achieved success. They were mere seconds away from knocking off one of the best teams in the country, like you said. I think really just a phenomenal job. And I defer to you here a little bit, but I just feel like maybe, because of all the excitement about kind of some of the other aspects of Iowa State sports right now, if Fennelly is even getting enough credit for what he did do with this group and what the potential is for next season as well.
I don't know if he can get enough credit. You remember the conversations that were being had this specific, honestly, day last year.
Yeah.
Because it was just days after they lost in the round of 64 to Toledo that, of course, Ashley Jones moving on to the WNBA, she had to, but Lexi Donarski, Danae Fritz, Maggie Espen-Miller-McGraw, all these players just gone. And it's, well, are we going to see an announcement in the next couple of days? Is Fennelly going to retire? Is Emily Ryan going to go too? Well, thank God she didn't go, because she led this team, maybe not as much as Fennelly did this year, but Bill would tell you that she played just as important of a role as anyone on that coaching staff did this year. So Fennelly deserves so much credit, because I remember his first post game, or I remember media day this year. He just said there's going to be a lot of good, there's going to be a lot of bad, and there's going to be nothing I can really do about it. It's just going to be along for the ride. And any reasonable media member fan, even people within or close to the team, it's going to like, yeah, it's going to be a struggle. Maybe try and finish top half of the Big 12. But they weren't. They finished the season ranked. They finished the season on a tear, winning, I believe it was their final. Yeah, they won their final 4 of the season, rattle off 2 wins in the Big 12, 20-point comeback win in the round of 64. And like you said, you're probably a layup with 17 seconds away in regulation from going to the Sweet 16. It's a tremendous coaching job by Fennelly, and the good part is it doesn't have to end.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to end in California. The future is so bright. You bring back, most likely, hopefully, everybody but Hannah Bellinger, and this team will be a top 10, top 15 team next November.
Yeah. Now, I think it's going to be really interesting because they overachieved this year, right? And now they're going to go into next season similarly as they were in some of the Ashley Jones years with expectations.
Yeah,
And
they're not
I
catching
think
anybody by surprise next year.
I think this group, what they showed me, even being so young, is they are mentally tough. I think from 1 through 10, 1 through 12, really the whole rotation. And I think that's something that the staff should get a ton of credit for. I don't think they were scared in any of these massive moments. Certainly were not last night. And I think that, in addition to kind of the talent and the experience, is something you can really build on. And honestly, I'm excited to see it because, like I mentioned, they're not just good, they're a fun basketball team. And I think they'll be, in that top, 12, 14, maybe 10 type range. And I think a Sweet 16 is a super, super fair expectation for next year.
Yeah, it's definitely the expectation. And you talk about the mental toughness. A ton of that is coaching, but there's part of it that's just untaught. It's just either you have it or you don't.
Hmm.
And Crooks, I mean, national stage, just shows the whole country what she's about. 40 points, one of the most unstoppable performances I've ever seen in basketball. And she follows it up with probably the worst performance of her career. But you see videos in the locker room, courtesy of our friend Connor Ferguson. She's still got a smile on her face. There's the perspective on, I guess, not only what she accomplished, what the team accomplished. That's just something that's not taught. And then the mental toughness. I know Emily Ryan gets so much credit, but the shots Addie Brown was hitting, even though she was clearly just gassed and giving it everything she had to hit a shot. Stanford goes down, hit a shot. She hits another. Like, it's just all over the team. And Jalen Bristow, to not really have much of a role all season long. Ariana Jackson, Kelsey Jones both get hurt. She comes in and it looks like she's been playing in that 6th, 7th man role all season long.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all just fantastic signs of what could be a really, really fun winter in Ames next year.
I really did think they were going to pull it off, though.
I did too.
Seeing what I could, and that was about shade under half the game or so. I really felt like
3 with like 31 seconds left. It was like, oh, they're just going to do it.
Yeah.
And Stanford had a big shot of themselves.
Just the way that, Ryan answered the bell just about every time. The fact that they didn't allow Brink to have one of her great games either as kind of one of the best players, obviously, in the country, a likely top 3 pick at the next level. So it was really impressive. It was a fun game. It's cool. Kind of a lot of my Twitter was like the men's game, and it transitioned right into that women's game that I was seeing, just all the excitement and the commentary. So absolutely. I'm going to say, not knowing, the roster.
Iowa, Utah was going on.
Like that. Yep. Well, Aiden was probably watching that, but I'm going to say they slot in at 13 next season and they make a Sweet 16.
Okay. All right. I think Sweet 16 could be a low end expectation. I'm being serious. I think an Elite 8 Final 4 run next year is possible, but there's obviously so much that can happen between now and then. But you almost win at Stanford. If everything goes right next year, they shouldn't be playing a road game. In those first 2 rounds, they should be hosting again.
Yeah, for sure.
And we all know what an NCAA tournament game at Hilton can be like. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about the offseason. Let's move in to some men's basketball talk presented by our friends at Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Look at this bottle. That was an incredible weekend to have some Steeple Ridge Bourbon. I think the Iowa State fans that were in Omaha probably had enough of it. Maybe mix in a salad before Boston. But it's a delicious bourbon. Have it on a big rock, a huge glass or a huge ice cube. You can find it in your favorite liquor store or grocery store. And if they don't have it, ask for it by name. Lonely Oak Distillery's Steeple Ridge Bourbon. We want to thank them. Also want to thank Heartland Flags and Gifts. A couple weeks ago we mentioned if you got a truck like hanging up a flag in the back of it, getting a pull, so you can show off your team spirit driving down to Kansas City or Omaha. Unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be many Cyclone fans driving to Boston, but that's still not an excuse to not go to our friends at Heartland Flags and Gifts. Your team's in the Sweet 16. Show it off. Show off your Iowa State spirit.
You do think many will be making the trip out there, though, right?
Nah,
Maybe not.
it's been
it's
a
this
long
weird
3
thing
weeks.
where, yeah, on top of having a couple weeks of this back to back, I think there are some fans that if you're weighing a trip to going to Boston versus going to Phoenix,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think the Iowa State allotment will be sold out, obviously. There should be enough out Northeast. And then, of course, there are going to be the ludicrous fans that do decide to make the trip. But I don't think it's going to be some Boston takeover like we've maybe seen with bowl games. And like Aiden said, it's one of those things where, I mean, if they do the thing, if they go win 2 games, it's going to be tough. But if they do, there's not going to be a lot of people holding back from Phoenix. So, and at the end of the day, in Omaha, when there was 80% Iowa State fans, Washington State was better represented than I thought and pretty loud, but it didn't matter because they were so outnumbered. It's going to be like that in Boston either way. It really doesn't matter how many people you bring. If you play UConn, it's going to feel like a road game. So there'll be fans in Boston, but it's not going to be something we've seen the last 2 weeks in Kansas City and Omaha.
No, that's fair. That's a super good point by you, and like Aiden jumped in, I think, on multiple levels. Yeah, I love the Phoenix aspect. I think obviously a couple of huge battles ahead as we're going to get into. I think they're both going to be, really good games potentially, obviously, if they have them. But yeah, I kind of forget, Iowa State takes over Kansas City, of course, Hilton South. Then Omaha at times, that certainly felt like a home game, at least from afar. So yeah, that's a heck of a back-to-back. I'm sure some of the friends that I made out there and some of those crazy fans might be able to make it happen. But yeah, that definitely makes sense. And hey, you see what happens, save up for Phoenix if you can.
Boston is not cheap either.
No.
I know
nothing out east is there, dude.
I know it all too well right now. But let's talk Iowa State making the Sweet 16. TJ Otzelberger becomes the first coach in program history to go to 2 separate Sweet 16s with the Cyclones. That stat blew my mind.
Me too.
But it makes sense. Just a lot of odd timing on those Sweet 16s. Like, Prom gets credit for the 16-1, but that still feels like the Hoiberg era. You got Niang, all that stuff. But it just says so much about Otzelberger, where the program's become. Just a couple general thoughts. We just talked about the atmosphere, such an advantage. If those games were played in Greensboro, Pittsburgh, Memphis, Spokane, I don't know if they go the same way, especially that second game against Washington State. Having that crowd there was an advantage because you did get the clunker. Iowa State started 9 of 9 against SDSU. The Bunnies battled back, made it an interesting game, 4 points in the second half. Iowa State still flexed their muscles, pulled the game away. And then on the flip side, other side of the coin, they start 0 of 9 against the Cougars and win by double digits. Those are 2 very, very different types of wins, but at the end of the day, 2 wins and 2 wins, I guess, that just show, I would say, the high floor of this team, just resting back on that defense if all else fails.
Yeah, I'm smiling, for those that are just listening. I'm smiling because Jake's talking like me a little bit. I love saying, the high floor, high ceiling. I love that type of thing. I think it's exactly right. I mean, you can count on that defense just about every single game. I think that's phenomenal. it's funny. So I was out east, and uh, I was grateful, to have kind of some family just check out the game a little bit out there for like a couple days. And so we were just checking the box score early in that one. And, the people that I was with is like freaking out. They thought that Iowa State was going to lose that. They started, like you said, 0 for 9, I
Yep,
believe,
0 for
7
9,
nothing, and then
3 of
I think 11
16
to
at the under
2.
8.
Yeah, and it started didn't score for the first like 9 minutes, I believe, too. 8 to 9 minutes. It was
Yeah,
something like that. And, I just had confidence because I knew the atmosphere. I know the mental toughness, like we just talked about with the women's team. And I really think it speaks to, veterans for sure. Like experience helps. But again, I know the aspects of that program and the culture, and those are definitely some key components of it. So, definitely something to celebrate. That Iowa State stat you mentioned, Jake, that did surprise me. But outside of that, I'm pretty confident. I speak for the team in this and the fans and stuff that this is certainly something to celebrate. But I know they don't feel like their job or their season are close to done by any means.
You know me, I'm a doomsday type of guy. You've seen my text during games. I text our buddy, now Taylor Mauser burner. At halftime, I said Iowa State's winning by 12. Like I was oddly calm at halftime of that
Mhm.
game. And I think it's just because you see the parallels to that Pitt game last year where I went back and I didn't watch that game. No way I'm ever doing that again. But I went back and I was looking at the play-by-play. Iowa State didn't get their first field goal until the 9-minute mark of that game. Just a whole nother level of bad. But my point is last year Pitt had the chance to kill Iowa State, and they did. Like they got them on that cold start, and they hit shots. And they got shots. They got putbacks, all that. Wazoo had the chance to kind of step on Iowa State's throat early and didn't. And if you have the chance to do that to Iowa State and you don't, it's probably not going to go in your favor. So that's what's encouraging. Because we've talked about the mental toughness of the team enough this year, but it's just encouraging that you can start down 7-0, get down 14-6, and as long as you just keep doing those daily habits that Coach Otzelberger preaches every day, they're going to be fine. And they were fine. And they won another game comfortably. I just want to talk about Tamin Lipsey. Tamin Lipsey. So I've been too close, I feel like, to this story to really kind of pull back and look at the big picture. So Lipsey, he comes in when he commits, or not even when he commits, like the year before he was going to enter the program, 6 months, he was going to be behind Tyrese Hunter, Jeremiah Williams, and what a lot of people thought, AJ Green. For different reasons, none of those three worked out. So Lipsey comes in, not even really with a role at all, to the starting point guard and no other option. That is a huge step. He exceeds any expectation any coach, any fan, any media member had for him. But there were a lot of limitations. We talked about that Pittsburgh game. He wasn't being guarded, and that significantly hindered the offense. And there were genuine, legitimate questions this offseason about what could Lipsey's role be if he can't space the floor, if a team can just sag off of him. Well, he answered that and then some. He's now shooting, I believe, 40% from three, and he's not just a spot-up three-point shooter. These last 2 weeks, he has like 6 or 7 step-back threes. Like, what is even going on? It doesn't make sense. I think C-Dub asked Milan this on Thursday or on Saturday night. Like, has Tamin been doing this stuff in practice? He's like, no, like, I didn't see any of this in June. It's just, we talk so much about the three-point shooting, but Lipsey comes in this season And he has improved everywhere across the board so much to where he's not just this hometown kid that's filling in the starting lineup because a couple things didn't go right in the recruiting process or the transfer portal. He goes from that to where he is a legitimate All-American candidate, borderline top 5, top 10 guard in the country. When you write it all down, when you say it all out loud, it doesn't even seem real that all of that has happened in just 1.5 years of real time.
Yeah, I think really, really well said, Jake. I definitely do think he is a top, 10 or so guard in the country, probably a top 3 or 4 point guard in the country. I mean, just the completeness of his game, like we've always talked about, and how he's kind of added to it. I mean, I heard stories that, it was tough for jokingly, like the managers and the staff to keep him out of the gym in this last off season, just because of how much time he was putting in, and obviously working on the 3 point range, but also the mid range, and just consistently becoming a really good defender to one of the best in the country. I think that what he's done, it's pretty incredible. I can't say I expected it, though. I'm not shocked, because that young player just has the work ethic that is unmatched, truly, in a sport and on a team with a lot of impressive, players and mentalities. Like, obviously, he was a star football player for years. I get the sense that he kind of plays with that underdog chip on his shoulder a little bit,
Totally.
because he wasn't the most highly rated or recruited guy coming into Iowa State. Obviously the recruiting aspect was a major part for me, and it's been really impressive. And I think he's the type of player that, especially if, let's say somebody's a fan of, I don't know, just saying this kind of randomly, a Kentucky or Nebraska or other teams that are out, and you're watching the tournament and you see Tamin Lipsey. I think he's one of those guys that you jump on and you cheer for. And I bet a lot of fan bases are doing that. And I think it's been really impressive.
I don't need to tell you this. This is more for the audience, but pretty much how these media settings work, especially in basketball, you talk to these players, these coaches throughout a season 25, 30 times. The overwhelming majority, probably almost all of them, are at a press conference
Mhm.
where they're sitting, and you know what it's like to give a speech. Think back to high school, giving a speech in class. You're sitting at this desk, a bunch of people looking at it's just a hard setting to really, I don't know, be genuine. So that's where almost all of my experience with talking to Tamin is he's sitting up at a podium. He's talking to everybody. So that's what I've really enjoyed about the NCAA tournament this year, is talking to him in the locker room, talking to him in more one-on-one, 3-on-1 type scenarios. And he's been awesome. He probably gave, I believe it was me and Mark Freund from WHO 13. He gave us 6-7 minutes added extra of time from his general media on Saturday night. He gave us some really good stuff. And while we were talking to him, I just kind of thought, okay, he committed to Iowa State within a month of TJ Otzelberger being the head coach at Iowa State. So he committed when the team was coming off of an 0-19 season, and they hadn't even had a practice. Otz hasn't coached a game in Ames, and he still made that decision to come to Iowa State. I have the soundbite. Aiden, want to play it?
It was difficult. Obviously, just being a Cyclone fan and having the program be such a high level when I was a kid in middle school watching. Having that season was tough. Obviously, it was kind of during COVID, so there was no fans at some of the games. But once the TJ had came in, I just had so much belief in him and the vision that he set forth, and just wanted to dive in and take that journey with him.
Yeah, it was a pretty important phone call. So, we knew right away we wanted him to be the leader this program as we move forward. He's exceeded what anybody's expectations could have been because of his passion, his hard work, his talent, his character, his gifts, and just fortunate we made the call, fortunate that we had that connection. And I think with Tamin specifically, I mean, if you look at, things I value as a coach and really believe in, man, he has all those qualities of what I would want in a point guard. He's like that ideal guy. So really proud of him and how he continues to step up and elevate our program.
I absolutely had hope and dreams myself to lead a team deep in March, and just knowing early on the relationship that TJ and I had built, just had a lot of trust in him and his vision, and obviously it's been an awesome journey.
It's really cool. He's a kid from Ames that clearly just plays with the passion of someone who grew up loving that program, and it's just a great story. That's really all I got to say about it.
Legitimately an All-American, named honorable mention All-American as a true sophomore after kind of the lead up that you mentioned. It's been nothing short of impressive, and it's going to be really exciting. I know we're going to get to it here shortly, but some great guard play coming this week with the Cyclones.
Yeah, the next guy I want to touch on before we look ahead to the next week is Milan Momcilovic. I've said it on Twitter, probably a little too much, but Milan is the difference between a Sweet 16 and a Final Four, just with what he adds in terms of floor spacing, isolation at the end of shot clocks, because when he's on, he's just unguardable. You look at a guy like Tamin, a Trey King, a Rob Jones. Those guys are floor raisers, whereas Milan is a total ceiling raiser. Just with, I mean, if you've watched any Iowa State this year, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The fall away on the baseline, the spot up threes. He's got another gear that a lot of guys on the team don't have because he is an NBA talent. He's a guy that's going to make a lot of money playing this sport, but it seems so far away to that K-State game. What was that? 17 days ago. Took two shots and didn't play the majority of the second half. Looked gun shy, confident shot. Even against K-State in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, I believe he was only 1 of 7, 1 of 8, something like that. He was getting better looks, but he was firing. And then that Baylor game comes. Now, over the last 4 games, he is averaging 14.5 points per game. And it's the same story. Wazoo, he opens up ice cold. Getting good looks, they're just not falling. And I asked him if that is something that he could see himself doing back in December in terms of having a rough first half and just sticking with it in the second.
I feel like I would have maybe shut down a little bit, not been as aggressive back then, but definitely I grew, I learned. I just got to keep staying aggressive and keep shooting, because even my teammates at halftime were like, you got to keep shooting. So I just kept shooting, and good things happen when I shoot, I feel like.
A lot of teams like to, try to gap us to keep us from getting in the paint, because we're a team that likes to get in the paint. So once me and Milan start hitting shots, they kind of got to stay with us, leaving, lobs or layups for Tamin to keep.
Yeah, that's just what it is. They need him to shoot. If he goes out against Illinois, he can change that game. You don't want to get too far ahead of it, but you talk UConn. If you do match up with UConn, what's the path to beating them? It'd be one of the first probably 3 storylines I mentioned, and that's, you know what, you just kind of hope Milan goes for 18, 20 points, because it doesn't matter how well you defend him. If he's confident, he's getting a shot off, and he's getting, they don't look like good looks, but for him, they're good looks. That completely changes the entire team.
Yeah, I think that was really cool, him to say good things kind of happen when I shoot because he's somebody I got to know him pretty well throughout the recruiting process. He's confident, but he doesn't, kind of talk a lot about himself like that. It's not really kind of how he is. And it was pretty cool. I was watching with an old college friend, the Iowa State Washington State game, and they're flashing Milan and some great shots of his family on there. Also, just a really cool story, a great kid, and I think somebody that has exceeded a lot of kind of what the outside world, at least ceiling wise, like you mentioned, what people kind of expected from him. I mean, he's just a ridiculously good shooter that eventually is going to be good enough. I think if he really wanted, he could test kind of some of the pro waters after this year, but I certainly expect him back. And that shooting ability, that stretching the floor, he's actually an underrated playmaker too. All of that will eventually lead him to the NBA. I just think it's like that perfect fit, kind of what the Cyclones needed, similar to Curtis Jones with the ability to stretch the floor. And yeah, you make a really good point that actually a guy like him could find some success against UConn because he doesn't need to get to the paint or get to the rim to be able to score. But pretty big, enticing challenge lies ahead even this week before we get to UConn.
Totally. Let's talk some Illinois. Last I saw on DRF Iowa, I believe the Cyclones were 1.5 point favorites over the Fighting Illini. Maybe the best on paper matchup of this Thursday, Friday. The number one adjusted offense on Ken Palm versus the number one adjusted defense. I mean, that's all you got to say right there. Where worlds collide. Osen, I'm going to defer to you on this one. You're working in the Big Ten right now. You see Illinois. What weaknesses, if any, do they have on offense, and where can Iowa State exploit that?
Yeah, so I think first off, I know a lot of the Big 12 fans don't always love or watch a ton of Big 10 hoops. This is one of the best offenses I've seen in a long time. Just to kind of put that out there, just
The
because of
numbers back it up too.
the different, not just the talented players, but the different ways that they can win. I'll just start with that, and then kind of going into a weakness or two. They've got two legitimate stars, one superstar at the college level, Terrence Shannon Jr., what he can do specifically scoring the ball. Domask, a Wisconsin native that, he plays kind of like this, they call it booty ball, like Penn State did a year or two ago, where like he can post you up, he can find success that way, but he's also, like a big guard, but also a good shooter. Then I like Coleman Hawkins' game too. I think that, a way that Iowa State can kind of make things difficult on them offensively, I think would basically kind of be to turn them into just solely a jump shooting team. Because I just mentioned how they can shoot, but if you look at TSJ's numbers, like so much of his scoring, and this is a compliment, he gets to the line, he draws fouls, he obviously attacks the rim, he gets fouled. I mentioned Domask. Coleman Hawkins can shoot the three, but you don't want to just be, basing your offense on that if you're Illinois. They've got a nice depth piece here and there. Like Iowa State, I think they're both pretty deep, comfortably can go 8 to 9 deep, but that's what I would say. And what I would also say is to be physical. Not overly physical, where you're tallying up the fouls, because you've got a bunch of 76, 78% free throw shooters. But in terms of just not letting them get comfortable, not letting them get out in transition, I think those are a couple massive keys to me. And then I'll just add, the Baylor transfer, I believe, Dane Danger, has actually had a couple really good weeks recently. But outside of him, I wouldn't say they're as deep or as tough in the lane, post guys like Iowa State has.
Yeah, you've got kind of the dichotomy of they play so fast. And Iowa State has played much faster this year than they have the previous two. But you almost want to slow it down a little bit. Not play their game with them, but more so bring them kind of into a slugfest. It's interesting because Iowa State's best offense all year long has been in transition off those turnovers. So I'll be really interested to see what Otzelberger and Nate Schmidt come up with this week before the game. I've honestly watched quite a bit of Illinois too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sicko. I've watched a lot of college hoops this year. I feel like they're a good matchup for Iowa State.
Okay.
And not in the fact like, oh, they should win. I just mean in the sense of you're playing a 3 seed. Like, I'd rather see them than Creighton. Creighton gives me more BYU type vibes, whereas Illinois, just from a generic kind of broad brush type of eye test, they feel pretty similar to what Kansas has been the last couple of years. Really, really good team, really good supporting cast, pretty well balanced, but they're very reliant on one guy, which is Terrence Shannon Jr., Ochai Agbaji, Jalen Wilson. And we've seen, that game at Hilton last year, I think Jalen Wilson scored like 28. And it was like, okay, let him kind of maybe get his own, shut down everybody else. Where I don't know, it'll be interesting because you obviously don't want Terrence Shannon going for 36 points. But is it kind of the route, okay, we're not going to send doubles at Shannon every time. Let's just stick Keyshawn Gilbert on him, see if he can annoy him enough, turn him over. If you turn the guy over 4 times, turn that into 8 points, how much does that change the game? That's where it is. And I saw an interesting stat this morning on Twitter that Illinois has played 6 different teams with a top 20 adjusted defense and top 50 adjusted offense, and they're 1-5 in those games. So, and I watched them play Iowa both times. That first time they boat raced, or that second time they boat raced Iowa and Carver, but the first time Iowa was up like 4 or 5 points with 8 minutes to go. So they're not this totally unbeatable team, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Like a lot of people said kind of throughout the year, they were still looking for like that one marquee type victory, talking about the Illini. So I totally hear where you're coming from there. Yeah, I don't think you want to, double Shannon too often because like Domas can definitely play. I think another thing is like you mentioned, see what TJ, Nate Schmidt, and the staff can come up with. I actually think the physicality of Iowa State offensively, like Lipsey, like Gilbert, a guy like Trey King, those could also be some advantages for the Cyclones and some ways to kind of attack Illinois' defense. Because as good as they are offensively, they are not a good defensive team. I think Brad Underwood's a good coach, but like seeing them live and in person, like I think 4 times this year, there just doesn't seem to be a massive emphasis on that side of the floor. So I think, advantage Iowa State in those areas. I will say, though, it's obvious, but I definitely would stick by it. This is a game I'm not sure Iowa State can win, or Illinois, if a team gets off to a very slow start, like a 9-2, 14-4 for either team. Iowa State because of the pace that Illinois can play with, and Illinois because we know what Iowa State can do defensively. I think this game and I think Creighton, Tennessee have the chances to be 2 of the best games we will see all year.
Yeah, and that's Aiden and I were talking before you hopped on the call. A lot of people have talked about there haven't been any upsets this year, and it's been kind of a tame March Madness. I'm not going to completely disagree. It hasn't felt so far like it's been the craziest 4-day stretch. And yesterday specifically, it's not just it was chalk. It was there's so many blowouts until that A&M Houston game. Either way, long story short, when you don't have a bunch of these Cinderellas, it sets up for a baller Sweet 16.
The better basketball later on.
It feels like we haven't had in a couple of years because last year we've got like a team like FAU and a team like K-State. Like, seriously, Give me a break. In the Elite Eight? No, I'm joking.
I knew you were.
Maybe.
But yes, I'm totally with you. I was saying something similar to my family. You know, it's like not as many upsets, maybe not as much madness, but I mean, you look at the spreads for these games, like high quality teams that are going to play very close. Also, has been pretty helpful to my bracket a little bit. But are we doing a prediction on that one?
Yeah, let's do it. You go first. Prediction on the weekend
For Iowa State, then?
for Iowa State.
Okay. I'm gonna say they covered Thursday. I honestly think it's gonna be a classic, but with late fouls, attempts at a comeback, I like Iowa State by like 5 Thursday, 5 or 6, and then I got to see UConn up close in Brooklyn. We know if I had to be a side, it would even be homerish at times toward ISU. I've got accused of it even when I covered them. But that's a machine over there. I think if UConn gets there, it'd be Saturday. I would take UConn to win that game by 6 or 7.
I think Iowa State beats Illinois by 13.
Okay.
I really think it's going to be get out 12-2 start, force a couple turnovers, and it's kind of that type of game where you don't let Illinois get back in it. As annoying as the late start time, 10 o'clock local, 10 o'clock Eastern. This is so stupid. Oh my gosh. And did you see that the LA games are tipping off at 4 o'clock Cali time? What are we doing? Why? Why is I get you want UConn to be in the primetime slot. They're going to be tipping off 7 o'clock Eastern. That's fine. Tip the Iowa State game off at 4:30 in Boston or whatever. Who cares? That's better than 10 o'clock either way. Either way, I think that favors Iowa State. I think if you're a defensive type team, it's a little easier to sit back, waking up at 8 in the morning, waiting all day for the game, as opposed to being a team ready to go hit some threes, kind of like Illinois.
Okay. What about the extent of the weekend?
I don't think they're beating UConn. It's not that they can't beat UConn. You're going to need a Houston in the Big 12 championship type performance. Obviously, if you play that well, you're not really going to lose ever.
No.
So you can't expect that. But if you call that game a 100 out of 100, you're going to need like a 94 out of 100 to have a realistic shot at beating UConn. What I will say about this Iowa State team, they've been really good in the clutch this year.
Mm-hmm.
If you can just have it a game in the last 5 minutes, I'm not going to say I feel good about their chances of like going on to win no matter what, but you wipe a lot of the analytics off the table at that point. That's where I would feel not good, but I wouldn't feel as bad about Iowa State's chances in a pseudo road game to go to the Final Four if they're down 2, up 3, tied going into those last 5 minutes. But I think ultimately they'll beat Illinois and lose to UConn. I'll go by like 6.
Yeah, it's because the pseudo road part, like that really does play a role to me. I mean, I don't think it's a hot take that UConn's the best team in the country. I think Iowa State has shown that their ceiling can be too. But again, just having sat out there, I don't get crazy impressed by that many, college teams because there's so much parity. Like they're just so well built. And I think the fact that it's going to be, what would you say, 75, 80, 85%? Like it's going to be tough. But regardless, that's why they play the games, man. I mean, Iowa State is getting – honestly, I thought they'd even get a little more respect on the line Thursday. So, like I said, I would play that if I were taking the side. And we'll look forward to watching, hopefully, some incredible basketball this weekend.
It's also March. National championship rematch. It's no shoe-in that UConn just cruises past South Dakota, or not South Dakota, San Diego State. Too many SDSUs. South Dakota State should keep SDSU. San Diego State should have to change to something else. All right. I think that's all. Aiden, all for basketball. We'll talk a little bit of recruiting. Aiden, you have anything you feel like you miss?
Got Iowa State winning Thursday. I think they'll cover.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that.
So, Aiden goes on the record that I wish you would have said, I think Iowa State wins but won't cover. They win a 1-point game. Maybe I'll do that. No, so we got a couple recruiting notes. Iowa State gets Deshaun Jackson from the Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to come play punt returner. It'll be good to take the load off of Jalen Knowles' hands. Now they got a center from Charlotte. Guy looks like a beast. I believe it was our buddy Cyclone Dave on Twitter posted like a minute 50 of his highlights. I think I watched that video 4 times. He just looks like a really good addition. They got a couple high school basketball recruits and a football recruit. Osen, we'll leave you to your beat.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little background, especially on the second high school basketball commit, Xavier Mitchell, a Wisconsin native, as well as the football commit, Jack Limbaugh. Because obviously I covered Limbaugh early on in his recruitment at ISU. Got to see him live, workout camp, things like that. And then Mitchell I've seen play 4 or 5 times. So it's hoops. We'll start with Xavier Mitchell. I think he's a really good fit. I actually went back to the old Cyclone Alert and posted this. I think he's a really good fit for that system. Crazy competitive kid. Like, winning is everything. He's a good scorer, can get to the rim really at will, can facilitate, nice rebounder for his size. I think he's like 6'7", 210, 215 around there. Good frame to be able to kind of build off that. So I think he's going to be a really nice fit. I think he's like a maybe higher ceiling to Marion Watson is kind of what I would make like a current comparison to. And then Jack Limbaugh, that's a really, really impressive addition. He's a guy that's pretty versatile in terms of kind of what he can do defensively. Had several other big time offers. I remember seeing him at camp. You could tell he wanted that offer from the Cyclones. He earned it. He got it. High motor. I think he's going to be pretty impressive under Coach Rashid and that defense. But yeah, it felt like, just about every day, whether it was women's hoops, men's hoops, or some of the commits, a lot of news coming from Ames. Yeah, and a national champ.
What a weekend. See, the Car National Championship was weird. He got that early takedown, and then it was just, there's a lot of stalling both ways. But the Keegan O'Toole match on Friday night, that's a peak Iowa State sporting event memory of mine. Just the perseverance. I talked about this on Local 5 last night. So Carr comes in, he's got all the pressure in the world. He talked about it. He said, yeah, you come in, that's the Carr name, the expectations to win national championships. His dad wins 3 national championships at Iowa State in the 80s. That's a lot of pressure for a kid. And he comes in, he doesn't get to wrestle in the national championships in 2020 for obvious reasons. Gets to the top in 21, gets upset on kind of a BS officiated match in 2022, loses to his rival in 23, works his way back up. He's a 4 seed, beats his rival, then goes on to win a national championship to end his career. That is what I love about wrestling, is stories like that. And yeah, he just, that's hard work, dedication, and that's just grit. That's all wrestling is. And it was a really fun weekend watching David Carr got on top to be one of the best Cyclone athletes ever.
And really just an all-time weekend, I think, for Iowa State sports. I would say certainly could kind of feel that from afar as well. But fun week ahead, my friend.
Fun week ahead. We're going to leave it at that, I think. We'll see where we are next week. Could be doing this show here. Could be doing it in Phoenix. We have no idea. There's a lot of options out there, but it's the best time of year to be working in this industry. There's so much to talk about, so much going on, and it's There's never been a better time to follow along right here at Iowa Everywhere. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much to Heartland Flags and Gifts, Steeple Ridge Bourbon. We'll be back in the Channel Seed Studios